The little red light is going.
What's the date today?
25th.
So this is April 25th, 2023. And we're meeting to discuss the structural design for the Springfield Log Cabin School. In attendance, I'm Joe Smith, the architect for the project. Reed Sheets, the structural consultant for the project. And Maylin Herman at the back corner, who's also on the architecture team. And if you would all introduce yourselves, that would be great.
George W. Senior, Clifford McGadney,
Marilyn McGatney, board member. Terry Howard, CEO.
Melissa Hatton.
Jeffrey Turner.
All right. So a little bit of background. Since the last time we saw some of you here, and some of you were new to the room, the last time we met, we reviewed structural options for the repair of the Log Cabin School building. And since that time, what we said in that meeting, we've done something completely different. And that's because in thinking about the scope of what we were proposing at the time, the solution that we thought at the time, after talking to the National Trust folks and talking to some of the folks at the state level in historic preservation, we decided that ultimately, in order not to jeopardize future eligibility of the building for National Trust grants or National Park Service grants, we felt that we needed to take a slightly different approach that was perhaps more conducive to not discouraging that kind of grant funding. And so what it meant was that we have derived or designed a structural system which inserts steel structural frames inside of the building, along with a lot of fundamental foundation, reinforcement and supplementation, and then additional work in the attic as well. And so we wanted to meet today to talk about what that scope is, to make you all familiar with that, and so that when the time comes to apply for future grants and so on, and also to get pricing for this work, which is I think one of the things you're going to need to do now, that you'll have, we'll all be on the same page with what's being proposed. So I'll turn it over to Reed to just describe what we're proposing and what's in those drawings.
I'll just pop up to the screen, that may be the easiest way to do it. So it may take about 15 minutes or so just to run through the primary work that we'll be doing. This is the foundation plan, so we'll start at the bottom and work our way up with this presentation. The existing brick piers are in poor condition. What we're doing to remedy that, at the perimeter of the building, we've got to leave those brick piers in place for historic purposes. So they'll be repaired, but we will be supplementing them with new footings, concrete footings, and then a series of relatively small steel posts. They're, knee posts essentially, below the framing down to the new footing. We have, as you see here, each of these, it kind of looks like a black dot probably on the screen at this scale, but each of these is a new steel post. So at the perimeter, they'll help supplement the brick piers. The interior, we are fully replacing those brick piers with new steel posts and footings. The other purpose of these posts is to reduce the span of some of the floor framing, to improve its performance, and also to give us 100 pound per square foot live load capacity, which we'll need for the potential assembly uses in this part of the building.
Let me add to that. You may remember last time, when the building was built as a school, it was built in a sort of customary way. Now, with the potential change of the building to be both a kind of museum space, but also an assembly space where you have gatherings, the building code requires those floors be able to support additional loading, more than it was built to handle.
Right.
And so there are different parts of the building that are doing different things, so the loading requirements are different in different parts of the building. So the 100 pounds per square foot that Reed mentioned is for those assembly uses. So we're talking about the meeting room space, the biggest auditorium space. We're talking about the central entranceway corridor. We're talking about really the north side of the building, which is the right side of the building in this plan. Whereas the left wing, the south side of the building is going to be, I think the last we spoke, would be interpreted or used as a kind of museum space for the history of Springfield Log Cabin School and its use. That does not require that 100 pounds per square foot. That I think it's 40 or 50 is sufficient there, 40. So the requirements for reinforcing the floor there are lesser than they are in other parts of the building.
Replace them. There's no chinking or anything, you know, that you would need to keep the water from penetrating into the logs. So we've got to treat them as a veneer and to keep the water from penetrating past those logs into the interior space.
So you know, when you look where the little, you know, there's a big log and then there's a little sapling that was used to sort of chink the gap. Those are missing in a lot of places. If you look through, you can see right into the back of the wood plank finish on, that's the inside finish on the walls. The big problem in the whole scheme of how you repair and reconstruct these log walls is why recreate the same faulty condition that was there before, where water could literally penetrate directly to the interior and cause all sorts of problems. So this is the big improvement to this system that we just described, is that by getting that, when the logs come down, it gives us a rare opportunity to actually access the back of that original interior wall finish. By sheathing that and by putting a waterproofing layer on that, you effectively create a watertight envelope. The logs then go back in, new and existing, sort of toothed together, and it doesn't matter whether that outside layer leaks like a sieve anymore or not. It just doesn't matter because the waterproof barrier that's behind it will shed the water down and shed it out of the wall. So it also makes a much tighter envelope so that in future use, if you air condition the space, if you have mechanical systems, that you're not, you know, you have what's equivalent to a wood tent right now, and there's so many holes in it, you might as well be conditioning the outside air as well while you're at it. This will create a much tighter envelope that will allow you to actually get some legitimate cooling and heating in that space for future use.
And we've also proposed to treat the logs as they go back up with a preservative coating that historically would have been on the logs. So that will protect the logs themselves from being damaged by water like they have been now, because that preservative coating has been off.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be like two systems. The logs will be protected, and then the interior of the building will also be protected.
Correct. But something less toxic than what you guys were using. Historically, what was being used.
We don't like creosote?
You know, we use motor oil on it. It has its place, but yeah.
What chemical would be used to preserve the log? What kind of chemical?
Probably this, you know, this something similar to the Thompson's water seal that would be a penetrating water preservative. And I'll say this with a caveat that it doesn't last as long as motor oil is splooged onto the wall, but with the reapplication of that, I mean, if you're gonna rehab the building and it's gonna be renewed, then there is going to be a maintenance strategy to maintain the building without it part of it. Say every 5 years you come back and treat the walls. And it'll also, I would imagine that the new logs will be stained to that dark brown color so that they look like the old logs that are interspersed. And that'll provide some sealing as well, that stain plus that penetrating sealing.
What about osmosis?
What's that?
Osmosis that they use to preserve.
So you could do that. It is possible to actually send those logs off to be treated, to be pressure treated with preservative that would really penetrate into it. If the money's there to do it, I think it's a terrific idea. And I know you have that big pile of logs out there. Now it needs to be quadrupled or quintupled in size, but those logs, there are treatment plants in Georgia that do that. And so long as we don't exceed the maximum size of what it can fit into their chamber, I think it would be a great idea to do something like that.
Yeah, and I doubt it would, because I'm sure, you know, places do telephone poles and.
Yeah, that's true.
But the other advantage of this system, long term, is is now that these logs right now are the load-bearing perimeter wall. So the other advantage of this long-term is we're adding a steel frame that Joe alluded to earlier, based on our conversations with some of the historic preservation folks at the state, that will now serve as the load-bearing plane for roof loads. This will also serve to resist wind loads on the walls. So right now, there's not a lot of wind load resistance. We're mitigating that with these steel frames as well. What the advantage long-term is, if you do have deterioration of an individual log, you can, right now in your system, you could not take that log out without essentially rebuilding the entirety of the section of the wall it's in. With this new system being more of a veneer, you would be able to pull out an individual log and replace it if in 30 years you have deterioration, or if there's some of these logs that we reuse that are borderline and they continue to deteriorate and they need to be replaced in 15 years, for example. So I think, you know, long-term, this will be a very, very good system, just a matter of getting there, obviously.
We're hoping that some of the logs, if you look at the outside face of those logs that's been exposed to the weather for some time, there's deep checking in them, even the cracks that have opened up from shrinkage of the wood fibers. We're hoping that the backside of those same logs is in relatively good shape because it hasn't had the solar exposure of the outside and it's been relatively protected from the moisture. So we're hoping that, you know, to get up to hopefully as much as 50% of the logs being reused, we can basically take them out of the wall, flip them over, and put them back. And because they're not the structural unit, they're not the thing that has to hold the roof up anymore, the integrity of those logs is less critical. It basically has to hold up itself and the logs above it, and that's it. It doesn't have to hold the roof anymore.
Wonderful.
And we're anchoring it back with some, you know, some screws for wind purposes, so that'll help temporarily with some of that process, or some of that self-weight support too. I guess we can go back to I was just gonna finish running through this list. So that was where I got sidetracked, was fully remove exterior walls in the area of the work. And then what Joe also mentioned earlier, fully remove the subfloor and flooring for crawl space access in the area of the work, to be able to get to the members that are there to rehabilitate them. Remove all interior piers and all damaged first floor to be replaced with new members in the area of the work. Install new footings, new steel piers, install new first floor framing members. Then we put the subfloor back, or we put new subfloor in, you know, probably many cases, which would just be 3/4 inch tongue and groove plywood or OSB, much like you would have on a new house today. Install new steel framing and roof ceiling support beams, and then the last step, which we'll get into as we go to the next slide, is the supplementation of the rafters and ceiling joists. So that brings us to this plan, which is the ceiling framing plan. So from the attic, there has been substantial movement, warping, rotation, gaps where we shouldn't see gaps in many of the ceiling joist laps, and then also in the rafters themselves. There's a large gap at the ridge that has leaked and has led to a lot of that deterioration in that center corridor now. I think part of the reason for that is the rafters are braced to these 2x6 ceiling joists in these outlying rooms, and that is a very long span for a 2x6 ceiling joist, especially when the roof is braced to it. There's also, once water starts getting in and you have, you know, humidity and moisture and everything else in that attic space, that certainly doesn't help with those, as those gaps and warps and all that movement starts to occur. So what we're doing here is we're remedying those issues by installing new LVL, which is a manufactured wood beam within the attic space. So those will go generally on top of the ceiling joist and obviously under the rafters. The ceiling joist will end up getting hung from those LVL beams with some Simpson straps, some metal straps. And then the rafters will be rebraced to those LVL beams, so that those LVL beams serve two purposes. They reduce the span of the ceiling joist, and they also pick up all that roof bracing load that is now going directly into the ceiling joist. In conjunction with those ULVL beams, we have those steel frames that we just saw in the detail that we were showing for the exterior walls, and they'll help support those rafters and also ceiling joist at the exterior wall that's now just strictly supported by the log wall. This part of the work is, if it's an LVL beam, it's generally in the attic. If it's a steel beam, it's generally below the ceiling. So that's, kind of a good way for you to keep, if you're trying to keep that straight in terms of what's going to be in the attic and what you're going to be able to see. There shouldn't be any LVL beams in sight. Those should all be hidden in the attic space. Only those tubular steel beams that we saw just a moment ago in the section will be visible.
And then the typical, we point out and say a typical classroom space.
Right.
What would you see
Here.
inside the room with the steel,
Right.
steel structure? How many are there, and where are they?
Yep, great point, Jeff. So, for example, let's take this classroom at the southeast corner.
That has all the kitchen equipment in it now?
No, that's the
That's
other.
the other end.
That's not kitchen, yeah,
The
this,
one Reed's pointing to is the one that's missing its coat closet.
yeah, it's a screen.
Oh, that's right.
I think it was silk screening room.
They took the cloakroom out of that. That's the one, yeah, okay.
So what you'll see is a steel post in the corner and every 10 to 15 feet on center. So there'll be one in this corner and then two that are coordinated with the window locations so that they're not blocking the
Because
windows.
the windows are pretty.
Right.
So you said steel, it's gonna be colored steel?
It can be painted if you want it to be. It can be.
It'd be a fun interpretation of
Okay.
that, but that's really it.
You could make it blend as much as you want, or you could make it stand out as much.
Yeah, the window is beautiful.
So one post would be right smack in the middle of the
Yes.
6 windows?
1, 2,
Six.
3, 6 windows.
So there's a mullion between them, so it'd sit right in front of that, then another one just to
At the
the
jam,
edge of the window.
and then at the corner.
Yeah.
And then one at the corner, and then another where our new LVL beam in the attic will need a support point at this end wall, and that also helps brace those logs in that end wall for wind load.
And that's right in the middle of the window on that end wall too, so between the two.
And by middle of window, we don't mean blocking the eye, we mean in
Front
the,
of the mullion between the two windows.
that's right.
And then the other corner?
Yes, then we have one more in this corner, absolutely.
But the posts any interior posts for the LVLs are hidden within the wall framing? Is that right?
That's right, any interior posts for the LVLs, except where I double use those posts at the exterior walls. So at the exterior walls, I use those posts for two purposes, and also supporting the LVL load on them. But that is, that LVL, well, you could go to that detail 4, Joe, on 301. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, here it is. So this essentially is so this is the steel tube that is below the ceiling, and then there's the LVL beam above the ceiling. And this is our steel column that's inside the room.
So you would see from this line down would be exposed. But everything above that would be in the attic.
And that's a good spot to talk about size too. Those columns are gonna be 4 inches by 4 inches.
Right.
So they're not crazy extensive.
Yeah.
And then those steel beams, do you have a size?
6 to 8. 6 at the walls with less load, and 8 at the more heavily loaded walls.
So they're relatively compact steel and they're tubular,
Yeah.
so they're square.
Especially where the ceiling is, I think ceiling in those spaces is 12 feet. So, I'm speaking from memory. But, so you're up higher, a couple of feet above what this ceiling would be. So it's gonna be up there. It's just not, like I said, it should be
Right.
as low impact as it can be visually.
And if we go back to the plan that we were looking at, in all of the classrooms that do have coat rooms, half of those steel posts that you were pointing out will be located in the coat room, correct? There
True.
is no additional
Yeah,
steel
no.
framing in the center of the
That's
classroom.
right,
Yeah.
that's right, yeah.
So
So like,
3 of the 4
Right.
classrooms, yeah, the north and south wall steel framing will be in the coat room exclusively.
And ultimately, you may choose in that one classroom that doesn't have the cloakroom, you may choose to reconstruct that wall, restore it to its original configuration. I'm not sure why it was taken out in the first place. And then that would be matching, the classroom size would be matching everything else in the building.
All right, I think we're ready to go.
So these posts, like these two
Oh,
in
yeah.
the middle, those are hidden in walls.
Yeah. And that's just studs, that's just 2x4
Okay, so
studs.
it's just, okay.
Yeah, packed together.
All right. Next one.
So this is up to our roof. So I've shown some of those same beams in this plan, though I haven't relabeled them just so there's no duplication in the contractor's pricing. I want to make sure he knows that's just happened once at the ceiling. The rafters, where let's see, I've used a, documented where I think these are going to need to be supplemented, and that's in these that have the SR label on them. So this is the area where the rafters seem to be the most deflected, the most warping, the most gaps, seem to be prevalent in these areas. And you can see some of these areas are adjacent to the wall that has collapsed. And then other areas adjacent to the ridge, these rafters go up beyond the corridor walls to the ridge. So I'm expecting that all of those will need to be supplemented with a new 2x6 to achieve what we want to achieve from a roof loading standpoint.
The split at the rafter is also a factor of the wall on one side collapsing down, correct? Or is it that it's?
I think it's more of the deflection of the ceiling joist that they're braced to.
Okay.
Yes.
So as a supplementation, will the existing rafters somehow be lifted and pushed back together again, or the supplementation will cover the gap?
The supplementation will cover the gap.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the replaced roofing would then seal that up.
Correct.
Type of way.
And that's a great point, Joe. The other part of this roof repair, really the big part of it, in addition to supplementing the rafters, is we're pulling off the metal that's there now, the 1x purlins that are there now, and replacing that with OSB, oriented strand board, wood panels, and then putting back the roofing on top of that. So that gives us a much more stable roof system, and also gives us a roof diaphragm, which helps us resist wind and seismic forces. Not so much seismic for your area, but wind for sure.
One of the choices that we'll all have to make is what happens with the roof. What is the roof going to be? Because it is possible to potentially reuse the existing 5B print, the rusted 5B print that's there, but not to use it as the actual waterproof piece of the roof assembly. By that I mean, on that sheathing, by sheathing that roof and having a continuous surface, you could put a membrane in on that roof that would then be hidden underneath the metal. That membrane would actually be the waterproofing layer, and the metal would go back on, basically for aesthetics. Once you take off a metal roof, it's awfully hard to put it back on and make it watertight, because you've got all these holes that you're going to have to match every hole. So that's one way to do it, if that rusted roof look is exactly what we want to go back with. There are new products that also are rusted metal that are a special kind of steel that can go back, that will rust very quickly and then stop rusting, and it seals itself up. That is an option for roofing as well, for a new kind of roofing. Or just a new metal roof of some kind, a new 5B print roof could go back on, but it's going to be either silver, a galvanized color, or it would be a color like red, a dark red or dark green or something like that. So I don't know, historically, I assume that the original roof, if you saw it in 1935, it was a galvanized roof, it would have been silver. And then just weathering over the years has made it rust. you know, I sort of go back and forth on what the best is, as the sort of curators of this resource of this building. Do you want to make it look exactly the way everybody who's alive is familiar with? Or do you want to take it back to its original appearance? Because it would be a different decision based on what your decision is about how that gets done. So there's a lot of options in the roof, is I guess the short way of saying what I just went on about. But it's some things to think about.
George, you remember the roof when you were at the school?
Yeah, it showed the picture, Dr. Polar, pull up that picture.
You
That's
with me?
Dr. Polar picture. It was a silver.
So the person who's alive remembers
Sorry,
the roof is
I
being
misspoke
sealed.
then. I apologize.
Yeah, the picture of that, I think Dr. Polar, the first, the superintendent of schools at that time.
Right, JT. Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Him outside of the west, outside of the front entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was like.
How did the roof look?
We have.
Unless it was painted, I would bet you money that it was silver.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
silver.
George remembers it.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
silver.
He attended the school.
And it's weathered so evenly.
Well, it was painted, let me say this.
It was painted as
Yeah,
silver.
it was painted a color that would blend in with the rust. Later on, I remember
Okay.
that, what the man, Mays, T.E., what Bueller Mays was,
Tim?
Tim Mays.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tim, they mopped it with, some kind of solution
Okay.
that made it close to the rust color that it had done over the years
Yeah,
that come
yeah.
to it.
So there's really precedent for any one of these solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Really.
Paint, rust, or silver.
Fortunately, the profile of that roof is readily available. It's still made by metal roof manufacturers. So so you can get exactly the roof. The one drawback to that kind of roof is that the fasteners, the screws that hold it in, are exposed. And the way that screws are done now, they have a little neoprene gasket that goes around it and kind of seals the hole. But that neoprene fails when it's exposed to the sunlight for 10 years,
Right.
15 years.
That
So
makes
then you gotta
sense.
go back and put the screws back in with new fasteners. I think that's gonna be an unfortunate reality of the stewardship of this building, is that there are gonna be things like that have to be done. If a new roof goes back on, then you could just put a typical underlayment underneath, which is typically a plastic sheeting of some sort, and then that roof would be the waterproofing layer. You'd have to keep an eye on your fasteners in the long term. I'm not talking 5 or 10 years, but more like 20 years. You'd have to probably replace them. If you went back with the historic roof, then you need to have the actual waterproof membrane installed underneath it. That's a more complicated assembly, but you'd end up with a rust-colored roof that might be better to your liking. But anyway. Okay.
I think that's about it. We may go back to I think it was on the foundation plan where I just briefly showed the phasing. There we go. So phasing wise, seeing this portion of the building where we have the collapsed wall as being phase 1, and then the remainder being phase 2, with the ability for you to break that into sub-phases if necessary, or as necessary. But we did feel like this was the first piece that should be dealt with because of that collapse.
And when you're talking about this area as phase 1, that's all of the work. from
That's foundation to roof. Yes, it's very difficult to do this in any other phasing breakdown because we have exterior walls that have to be rebuilt, brick piers that aren't in good condition, floor framing that's not in good condition. Have to remove the subfloor to be able to get to the floor framing. So it's going to be very, until you have a stable roof structure, water's just going to continue to come in. So it was very challenging to do that in any other way, and I didn't see any other way we could really phase it other than just taking a chunk of the building, getting it done and getting it done right, and then moving on.
And I'm sure you've, written out the process for that in your drawings, but we also have that in the report as well, the process for the phasing and how that needs to
Right.
happen to maintain a watertight building when you
That's
have
right.
half that's been rehabilitated and half that hasn't.
Right. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, just in summary, this is a big project.
Yes.
So don't let me minimize what's gotta be done. And I don't think I have, or we have, but just to make sure everybody recognizes that going forward. It'll be a very, interesting and, exciting project to be involved in from a personal standpoint and professional standpoint. But it is a big project. And that's really all I, wanted to bring to your attention from some review of the drawing.
Thank you. I got a question. So if phase one is that north wall, how far back are we talking about from foundation to top?
It would be all the way back to the inside corner. There's no real way to cut off the work until you get to an inside corner, and so this logically becomes the whole, that part of it. Potentially, well, actually, the south wing is in the best condition, I think, of any part of the building, so really then the middle, you're sort of phasing as you go across the building this way, so what I would imagine. I know that there are some problems at this corner, and that might be thrown into phase one, just to stabilize that corner, because it's really collapsing now. But, yeah, moving this way through, this certainly, the roof's still closed over this area, and the floor's in good shape. So this is the part that has the lightest touch. Also, remember, this is the 40 pounds per square foot area as well, so it doesn't even require all that, as much supplementation of structure as the rest of the building, so I think,
So point out what will be phase one, then phase two and phase three, and what we're doing this in 4 different phases?
It could be, and here I can use technology to,
So it'd be like phase one, and then phase 2A, phase 2B, if you decide to split up the rest of the building. Otherwise, it would just be north and everything else.
Oh, okay, I
guess it
guess.
would go.
Yep, you got it, Jeff.
So phase one in blue, use my virtual magic marker.
Okay.
Then phase two, it could be one of two things. Overall, phase two should be this, but it could be split here. Or no, actually, maybe it would be better if it's split at the
hallway.
Yeah, so this is the corridor. So this right now is the auditorium space.
Right.
And the corridor is just forward of it. So you could potentially split it that way. And then phase 3/4.
No, it'd be phase 2B.
2A, 2B.
2A, 2B. Because phase
Phase 3
is mechanical.
is mechanical. Wait, what?
Yeah.
All of, yeah.
So phase 1 and phase 2 are about the structure, but then in phase 3 we get into mechanical, and phase 4 is interior rehabilitation.
So you're saying that as part of the green phase?
The
you would
green
green phase
phase
be
could
2C.
be 2C.
Yeah,
If the X red is phase 2A,
yeah.
the red with no X is phase 2B, the green is phase 2C.
This is very complicated.
So you got
Yes.
4 structural phases and then, yeah.
So,
You like
Because
numbering
conceivably
things.
that
so yeah, so
area-
Maylene is saying those are your structural phases.
That's right,
Yeah.
you got 4 structural phases that we're calling 1, 2A, 2B, 2C. but-
Yeah. Because it could be 1 and 2.
It could.
Yeah.
Or it could be 1,
Right.
2A, 2B,
Right.
2C.
Okay.
It just depends on what
And you
the
said phase
situation
3 would
is,
be
yeah.
mechanical, what was the other one?
What's phase 4 is interior rehabilitation, so all of the finishes, paint, trim.
That's where the extra bathroom will come into?
Electrical at the
Actually,
same
the
time?
fixtures, so I would imagine that the fixtures could go in 3 or 4, because they kind of overlap, you know, like the lighting and the
Yeah.
toilets, the sinks. That could be a coordination. You could put the fixtures in phase 3, or you could just put the plumbing in and then wait for phase 4 to put all the fixtures in.
Ah, choices.
Yeah. Again,
What-
it depends on what the grant is like for phase 3, where the funding is.
What's this one? 2A?
2A, or did you want to do the auditorium first?
It would probably be better to do that section first, because that's where that corner has collapsed.
Which one did,
Okay.
wait, I would cover it.
Is this right? 2B?
Mhm.
And then, I'm gonna erase this again, so that's okay. And then green phase 2C?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Mhm.
What do we, I'm thinking aloud here, as far as the electrical, in order to do the mechanical stuff, you're gonna need to do electrical at the same time. And is that all part of the interior rehab?
It's in phase 3, so we've broken out all of the MEP systems,
Yeah,
mechanical, electrical, and plumbing
Oh.
systems, into phase 3.
okay,
And then any of the finishes, interior rehabilitation of the floor, the wall finishes, painting, potentially fixtures, anything to take it from where it is at the end of phase 3 to a fully functioning, code compliant, usable space that you can occupy.
Ooh, say that again, I like that. Fully usable, code compliant.
Functional
multifunctional.
space,
Ooh.
something that you can occupy and that the county will give you a certificate of occupancy for.
Kinda don't care.
We don't have
I would kind of don't give the.
No?
But they don't.
Well, that's easy. You can do whatever you want.
Just about.
Okay, I can email this to all of you,
Thank you.
because of the magic of technology. Let's see. So,
There's gonna be an upgrade in the electrical part of it, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be.
yeah,
What phase would that be for?
That would be
that's
three.
in 3.
That was phase 3.
Anything mechanical,
She called it in-
electrical, or plumbing is in phase 3.
But the work to go into the walls, to install electrical, is gonna, are we proposing that the walls will be left, whatever, they're gonna be just left open then after that work goes in, and then,
Yeah.
then phase 4 will be when it all gets covered up properly and.
Or the sheet rock.
Yeah, wood planking, whatever
Yeah, we probably
goes in.
need wood plank to go back into
I
there.
think that, yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. So then, so after all that work goes in, it's gonna look like it's been butchered again a little bit. Because you're getting, all these systems have to go into structure, into walls and stuff. And sadly, it'll sit that way until that 4th phase comes along and everything gets covered up and repainted and fixed. Or if the money's there, then you just do them both at the same time, 3 and 4 at the same time, which would be ideal.
That's very true. There's no one saying that you couldn't do any of these phases together if the money was there. You could do phase 1 and phase 2 at the same time if the money is there. You could do phase 1 through 4 at the same time if the money is there.
Thanks, Joe.
Have I said it to you?
Yes.
I did?
But
Wait,
something came through.
Really?
So now let me double check it.
I think, I haven't sent the email to you yet. but-
Oh, that was Jeffrey talking to me. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Jeffrey done beat you, Joe.
Sorry. You notice my old man, one finger typing.
I didn't know.
It's not
What
the,
did you say? Well, that's the way I do it. I do the same thing, we all.
So go on, send it twice.
yeah,
Go,
web is
okay.
right here.
go ahead on and send it twice,
We
Joe.
all in the same.
Now I've forgotten what I'm doing, I would definitely, oh, that's right, hold on, give me a second. Sending to you, Terry, now,
Thank you.
actual size. Okay, let me know when you get that. So the phasing will help too. I think, you know, your next steps would be, and we can absolutely assist with this, is getting with Landmark and the fellow whose name I can't remember, the other contractor fellow.
Jason
Yes.
Gentry.
To put some numbers to this, because that's the most important information. You know, unless the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars that'll be required to even do, say, phase one, I think it's coming from grant money, hopefully National Trust or National Park Service, and so you'll have to have that budget. So now we have these drawings, and now we need the budget that goes with the drawings. It can be, if they can break it down by the phasing, then if you know, potentially if the National Trust Action Fund gave Springfield $500,000 to start the work, then phase one could be done. I think in that there's 3 phases of equivalent intensity, monetary intensity. I think you're looking at, you know, well over $1 million, $2 million of total work here. And so it can be broken down as needed based on what's available. The as you know, the grant route is slow and it's tedious. There's a lot of hoops that have to be jumped through and matching funds requirements and all sorts of stuff that go along with it. But I think it's the most feasible route at this point. I know that but there may be benefactors who would be able to assist with that as well. It always seems to be, you know, this, you all know this, it always ends up being a combination of funds coming from different sources, appeasing different people, however it's necessary. And then we'll be with you every step of the way through the whole thing.
Thank you.
What did you estimate?
I think it's $2 million at this point. Now, we've seen crazy inflation.
Yeah.
But this, easily, to do it all at one time would be easily that much. Potentially, it could be more. There's a lot of steel. It's a little bit like the game Operation, you know, where you're trying to pick the bone out of the hole. It's inserting a lot of this structure is going to be surgical in nature. You know, it has to be carefully done. You can't just go in and open it up and take it all apart and put it back together again. So it's challenging work, and because it's challenging, it's expensive.
Yeah.
You got to find the right skill set of the people who know how to do that, who are going to do the right thing, and you know, it's always a collaborative effort.
We talking heavy equipment?
I don't, you know, not any more than any other project, I don't think. It's just got to be done strategically, in sequence, you know, because everything things build upon other things, and the foundation is the start as you build up until you get to the peak of the roof, and then you move on to the next one. But dismantling those logs is going to require, not dismantling, but doing the log work is going to require somebody who has some skill with that type of work. Also sourcing your material. This is my personal feeling. The history of the building, that material was sourced locally back in the day. To have the new logs come in the same way from local landowners who were donating that material, or not donating, but having that material come from the local area is the most proper thing that you could possibly do. And I know you've got that pile there. I'm not sure what would have to happen. Those would need to be peeled and treated and whatever else has to happen. But trying to work out the sourcing of that is an interesting and challenging thing to do, which you could start that as well. Getting it dried out, seasoned, and all of the other things too.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we do it, because, you know, that's above my level, that's above my thinking.
Yeah.
But I know there's a couple of companies that actually will bring their equipment to the site to peel them and
Nice.
I don't know how expensive they are, because they don't like to give you their price up front. They like to tell you, we'll come in and set it up and give you this. So I've written one of them. He did send me a manual. There's no pricing in that manual.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it would cost, what they do.
I would hope that the significance of this building, the significance of the project would motivate folks like that to be as generous as possible.
Mhm.
And I think everybody I've talked to about this building and who understands the significance feels motivated to help in some way. And often it's in ways that are not that useful. But, you know, if you've got somebody who can really do something and is willing to volunteer or donate, that's hugely important as well. But you never know. I mean, it's hit or miss whether that'll happen or not.
Yes, you're right about that. I think one thing that may help us is if we could figure out how to put like those signs and drawings up. People visiting, I don't know they're there.
Yeah.
And so if that information is on site, getting the signage, making sure it's weatherproof, and having it posted there so when those people visit, and then also having a way for them to give us feedback.
Yeah.
Or if they want to leave a donation, know where to put it. That may also benefit us. Antioch Church uses some kind of voice box that tells the story of Antioch. They have 2 of the members singing "Wade in the Water." That's what they use, and I think they got their grant from Michelle Zupain's group, TAD. They got their grant from that. So that's what they use. If we could figure out a way to leave that information up, make sure it's waterproof, way for them to contact us if they want to volunteer in-kind service or donations, that may help us out. Just a matter of knowing what to do, where to get the signs from, how to weatherproof it and do that kind of stuff.
It could be worthwhile to approach somebody at UGA. I know UGA is a huge institution, but there may be an exhibit design class or in the, I don't know if it will mark on.
Museum studies,
Right.
what the certificate, in history department, I think. And then, they have, I would imagine the MARDOT has something. The art school.
The good thing about this is that you're looking for a tangible thing. You're looking for display boards, and you need those to be, an interpretation of the site in 3 or 4 panels, and maybe a leave behind a paper thing that people can take with them.
Yeah, like at the park.
Yeah. So that's great. That's a great thing to go to a professor with and say, hey, would you be interested in making this a student project, or do you have a student who would be interested in doing this? Because then you have a qualified designer doing that, and they might even have a way to have those produced. They might even turn it into a whole project where they actually go do the installation themselves. If it's an exhibit design kind of class, I think professors typically clamoring for those kinds of real world experiences for their students. So unfortunately, I mean, I can potentially assist with some of the preservation faculty to figure out who you should talk to, but it's so close, since Athens is so close to Tolliver. I think they would.
And what pictures we should use too is another question. It's like what, because some people are so much more intelligent of, that's not a good word, they're much more knowledgeable of architecture work.
Yeah.
And then you have people who don't, but think it's a cute building.
Yeah.
It's like what pictures do we use? What do we want to? How do we want to? Say it again, Melissa.
The happy medium, where you reach in, the person is want facts, give you what you're doing, and the person is just like, okay, what are you doing?
Yeah, because you got those different people. The ones who want the facts and the ones who want to see what it's going to look like when it's finished.
Yeah.
And so we need to know which one of the exhibits, what we want to display in those exhibits.
So one of the things, I'm going to throw this out there, I don't know that it makes any sense at all, but in terms of a future use that potentially would open the project up to additional funding, is there, I read a story a few years ago in the New York Times which mentioned Tolliver specifically as being incredibly underserved for healthcare facilities.
Yes.
and that there was a clinic at the school or something like that that was being,
Yes.
barely making it or was being closed down.
It's 1 day, it's 1 day, yeah.
So, is there a potential synergy between your project and providing housing, something like that? Because then you're moving it outside of the historic preservation pool of grant funding and into sort of potential healthcare funding or something like that. And I don't know how that would work, but
I've only seen one place that has been able to do it, and I think I posted that on Facebook. It was it was almost like a gym, and they had all of these things under one roof. It was not so much housing, but they had medical, dental, visual, and people came to the area, and it was kind of like an Indian reservation. It wasn't something, but everyone came, and then that one day you got service, those things, eyes, ears, dental, was all covered, and they gave out resources. But like I said, I've only read one article of one place that did it successfully. So that is something, because Taliban County don't have. We have to go outside for medical.
Right.
We have no in-network. We used to have Tri-County that closed down. So Tri-County was a health facility where doctors came to visit. So we do need all of that. We need a lot. It's just looking at where we're located, because that's always going to be a problem. You have to have transportation, and we don't have a lot of transportation either. So looking at where we're located, seeing what it is that the county need that we can provide. What is that called? Marketing and supply and demand. So that's the key with us, is looking at what we can give for where we're located. And that's the issue, because we need so much. Our county needs so much. And then knowing who your blockers are, who's going to try to stop you from getting it done. Because whatever their reasons are, we have those too.
I'll just, Winder has the Wimberley Center, which is much larger than this, but it was an old middle school that is now nonprofit headquarters. So there's a bunch of different nonprofits all under the same roof. This would be obviously a smaller space, but potentially would give you day-to-day use from a museum and assembly space. It may not be, it may be more of a occasional occurrence review. Allow classroom use as office space or something. Perhaps you could partner with some nonprofits to,
Yeah, they're trying to figure out what to do too, because they called me last week, one of the nonprofits in town, wanted to know what they could use their business for. And I told you, you're perfect, you're in town. There's so much you can do, because we do clothing drives, and it just needs so much. This is our first year, the school's first year doing a PTA community yard sale. So it seems like the school has ideas, but this is their first year doing that. This was their first year having a community day where they invite the community out. So we're leaning toward things that will help us work as a group, collaborate. We just haven't got there yet. Because you just got to get around some people to do it.
It'd be a great spot for a community garden.
Yes, we've got the garden. I even built a shed, so I know what a 2x6 is. I know what a 2x4 by 12 feet. I built my first raised garden bed. It was 12 feet long, 3 feet high. I went for it.
You did. Mine was about 6 inches deep.
So we do have a community garden, and this will be our first year. So we got a lot of firsts going on in Taliban.
But there's funding for different pieces of that pie. And then the other thing, as far as the display board, not from a design standpoint, but that sounded to me like a great Eagle Scout project.
Yeah. Didn't think of Eagle Scouts.
Yeah, a local Boy Scout group. They probably couldn't design it, but they could certainly.
Well, you could get a student, like you could get
My son is an Eagle Scout.
and an Eagle Scout to build it.
Yeah, that'd be one of their projects to get their badge. Because my son did the bird cages at the park for his Eagle Scout badge. So hadn't thought about them. Boy Scout can use the exposure too. Excellent. Because I think the sooner we get those up, the sooner we can start getting some notice. We're gonna try to do something in August to give people an update, because people say, what are y'all doing? That's a loaded question. You know, what do you wanna know? So we're gonna try to give them something they can look at, feel, put in their visual, their memory. So this is what we're doing. How can you help? This is how you can help us. Maybe I need to tell them how they can help me. Okay.
How about social media?
I'm all over social media. There's very few spots you can go on social media you won't find Springfield. Springfield Community Center Inc, Springfield Community. That's very few. That's very few. Even some of the small ones. So we're all over social media, and we get a lot of feedback on social media. But a lot of times it's confusion. Folks think we're in Springfield, Illinois, or Springfield, Missouri, or they send me things asking about Springfield, Hancock. That's a lot of confusion because they think we're Springfield, Hancock. But I don't mind. I respond to them. So we're all over social media. Everybody's not on social media. Most of the people who give to projects like this are not on social media. They're too busy making money, so they're not on social media. One of the cutest things I did which was really crazy, and I stepped out there because I'm thinking, boy, they're gonna kill me on Facebook. I made a video asking for Ice Cube. Ice Cube real name is O'Shea Jackson. O'Shea Jackson has a degree in architecture. So I made a reel that said, we're looking for O'Shea Jackson in Springfield, Georgia. We need him. We have a project we think he'd be interested in. Of course, they're going to pull it. You can't do that to O'Shea. Ice Cube, you can't do that. So, of course, Facebook is going to pull that real fast as soon as they can scan. But it got O'Shea Jackson's attention. So that's the thing. I wanted his attention. I knew I was going to get in trouble when I did it. But so now it's a game of wait to see if he actually tried to contact me. Because all he did at this point is put a like on the post. So, and you know it's him because they give the official blue symbol. You know it's an official person. So now we wait to see if O'Shea really reach out to us. At this point, he should be researching if he's interested, trying to see if he really want to get involved with this. So we just have to wait and see. But he has a degree in architecture.
Good trouble.
You're good trouble. That's exactly what that is.
Terry, just holler when you need anything that we can provide, just holler. If you're doing grant applications and you need information, just holler.
Okay.
And if you, as far as talking to the contractors about getting numbers, it's better to have data which is more current when you're applying for the grant money.
Right.
And since the construction economy is so volatile right now, it's not to wait until the last minute, but also to just have more accurate. The closer you can keep it to the due date of the grants, the more accurate the numbers can be.
Right.
So, and you know the grant cycle is far better